So they tell you the economy is growing. They tell you we're in a soft landing. They tell you everything is under control. But if that's true, why is the government quietly preparing for civil unrest? Welcome to Canada, they don't want you to see. There are two documents that tell the real story of this country. Two reports that prove this crisis didn't just happen by accident. One was written over 25 years ago. It warned that humanitarian disaster was coming for our housing market. The government ignored it. The second report was written just 2 years ago by the RCMP. It warns that because of that disaster, the government needs to prepare for, and I quote, civil unrest. And guess what? That's the report they're finally paying attention to. So we need to ask a very uncomfortable question. Why is it that when experts warn about your suffering, homelessness, poverty, housing insecurity, the government does nothing for 2 decades? But when the RCMP warns about their safety, instability, and anger, and suddenly they find billions of dollars to break the glass and disarm legal firearm owners. This isn't about incompetence. It's a timeline of betrayal. Hi there, I'm Claudia, one of the Ragona sisters. Today we're connecting the dots on 25 years of policy failure that has led us to this exact moment. And if you're tired of the media pretending this crisis just happened overnight and want the history and data that they won't show you, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button right now. We're building a community of Canadians who want the truth. All right, so let's start by going back in time. The year is 2000. Jean Chrétien is Prime Minister. A report lands on the desk of the Toronto City Council for the Commissioner of Community Services. The language in the document is quite chilling because it sounds exactly like today. 26 years ago, they were already calling homelessness a national disaster. They warned that closing mental health institutions without providing supportive housing would create a crisis on the streets. They warned that the rental market was tightening and that low-income Canadians were being squeezed out. That was 2 generations ago, actually 2.5 generations ago. Babies born when this report were written are now about 26 years old. And what was happening in those 26 years? In 1993, the federal government effectively got out of the business of building non-market housing, homes that aren't priced by profit or market forces, but are deliberately made affordable through public, co-op, or nonprofit programs. They literally washed their hands of it. For decades, federal support was the new social housing. Construction was basically at a zero. They didn't start paying attention again until 2017 with the National Housing Strategy. They announced big numbers, 40 billion, 70 billion. It sounded great in a press release. But when the Parliamentary Budget Officer, our independent watchdog, looked at the books in late 2021, what did he find? Well, out of those billions promised, only a few $100 million were truly new federal money for building dedicated affordable units. The rest was repackaged loans and old programs with just new names. It was a shell game. While they were playing budget games, real Canadians here were just suffering. National emergency shelters exploded. We went from roughly 35,000 users annually in the mid-2000s to over 130,000 by 2015. That's not a statistic. That's basically the entire population of Barrie with nowhere to go. And while this was happening, what was happening to our wealth? Well, you hear the government say GDP is up, but that's the country's GDP. That goes up just by adding more people, and that's why they bring so many immigrants. What matters to you and me is GDP per capita, how much wealth there is per person. And if you adjust for inflation, the average Canadian is barely richer today than they were in the year 2000. In fact, between 2019 and 2023, our standard of living per person actually declined. So let's recap the last 20 years. First, the government stopped seriously building housing. Second, homelessness tripled. Third, the average Canadian got poorer. This wasn't an accident, it was a choice to prioritize asset inflation for the wealthy over survival and stability for the working and middle class. And now we've arrived at the inevitable conclusion of that choice. People are hungry, food bank usage is at record highs, we've got millions now. Cities are declaring homelessness and adding emergencies. And this brings us to the second report and the one they didn't ignore. In 2023, a report titled Whole of Canada 5-Year Trends for Canada was produced for the RCMP. It wasn't meant for you, it was stamped secret. It admits that Canada's economic situation is very bleak. It warns that a younger generation may never be able to buy a home. And here's the most important part. It warns the government to prepare for, and I quote, civil unrest. They know you can only push people so far. They know that when people realize the social contract is broken, that working hard no longer guarantees a roof over your head, people are going to get pissed off. They'll be angry. So let's look at the government's priorities. For 20 years, they couldn't find the money to solve the housing crisis outlined in that 2000 report. They said it's complicated. They said we need to study it. They needed more time. They kicked the can down the road. But the moment the RCMP warns about civil unrest, suddenly the checkbook opens. But not for housing, for gun grab. Right now, the government is planning to spend anywhere between $4 to $6 billion to confiscate firearms from licensed RCMP vetted owners. But they aren't building homes with that money. Of course not. They're destroying property. Why? Because this isn't about housing. It's not just about guns. It's about a cultural sickness that has allowed all of this to happen. We are living in a generation where feelings have replaced facts. We've stopped measuring success by results, like whether families can afford food or whether younger people can buy homes. Instead, we measure success by how nice the government sounds. We've traded competence for compassion theater. The government destroys your purchasing power by printing more money and driving up the prices. Then they turn around and give you a grocery rebate check. And people applaud. They say, oh, look, the government cares. They gave us money. I'm sorry, that is not help. Call it for what it is. It's a bribe with your own money. A rebate check doesn't solve the fact that Canada has one of the worst affordability crises in its history. It doesn't fix our weak economy or our productivity, our stagnant incomes, or our crushing household debt. It's an emotional band-aid on a gaping economic wound. But because we live in a society that values the right words over morals and integrity and math, we let them get away with it. If you run your household this way, ignoring the numbers because the story felt good, you would go bankrupt in an instant. And that is exactly what's happening to our country. We are in a deep decline. And it has gotten so bad that parts of the country are looking for the exit. Look at Alberta. The sentiment for separation is growing. Why? Because they're looking at the math. They're tired of being the economic engine for a car. The driver is steering off a cliff. When a province seriously considers leaving, that's a flashing red light that the nation is fracturing. But in Ottawa, their primary focus is always about messaging, on the slogans, on the right words. They think that if they say the right inclusive, positive words, the problems will simply go away. But feelings don't pay the mortgage. Feelings don't buy groceries. Feelings don't build homes. And feelings don't stop this decline. Now, let's look at where this leads. We've heard the phrase, you'll own nothing and be happy. Some still call it a conspiracy theory. But the critical thinkers look at the reality. They look at housing and see the truth. Supply has been ignored for 20 years on purpose. And the result, you can't own a home. You're basically a permanent renter. Protection? Well, they're spending billions and billions to confiscate property from legal vetted owners. And what's the result? You can't own firearms. You're expected to rely entirely on the government for your safety. But let's not pretend our neighborhoods are safer. They can release all the polished reports they want, claiming that crime is down. But we all know what the reality on the ground is. And what about mobility? Look at the push for those 50-minute cities. The war on the car is very real, guys. Restrictions, tolls, zoning, carbon credits. They say it's about convenience. It's not. It's about control, shrinking your world, limiting your movement, and calling it progress. And then there's the next phase, the so-called smart cities they talk about. Agenda 2030, Agenda 2040, and they sell it as freedom, everything you need within a 15-minute walk. But what happens when convenience becomes confinement? When owning a home is out of reach? When owning a car becomes unnecessary or even discouraged? When owning the means to protect yourself is banned? You don't have freedom anymore. You have dependency. And once you're dependent, you're at the mercy of whoever's in charge. If you can't move because you don't have a vehicle, if you can't build wealth because you don't own assets, if you can't defend your home because your rights have been stripped, you're stuck. This isn't fear-mongering, it's a wake-up call, because right now a huge part of the country still believes the government is coming to save you. They're waiting for the next rebate check, the next announcement, the next feel-good slogan. And if you look at the past 20 years of data, one truth becomes painfully clear. No one is coming to save you. That homelessness report from 2000 was ignored. The RCMP's 2023 warning of civil unrest, immediate attention. Our standard of living, dropping. Affordability, vanishing. Freedom to own, move, and build, being chipped away. We are at a critical point. If we don't start making decisions based on math, truth, and responsibility, we may not recover. And that national disaster of homelessness they warned about, if we stay on this path, it won't be a disaster. It'll be the daily life for millions of Canadians. So it's time. Stop listening to what they say, start watching what they do. Anyways, let me know in the comments, do you think Canada is at the point of no return? And if you want more real talk on housing, the economy, and the future of this country, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe, stay awake, and protect what's yours. See you in the next one.